And sometimes you come up with an idea that nobody's doing, and that's great, but you need to validate that. So you got to do your research. Look at data as well. So look at statistics, look at research. What does research say works well and what you want to do? Because I'm pretty sure there's some kind of research study that shows if you do mentoring, you need to do it this way. There's a lot of research on mentoring, right? There's a lot of research on houselessness and things like that. So know what the field is talking about. Like, know what's best practice, so you're starting well informed.
Welcome, Melanated Married Millionaires in the making and friends, to another impactful episode. We're about to go through and highlight a melanated married couple, or just go through some lessons that we got. Make sure y'all tap in with the conversation. Queen, where can they go to tap in?
TheM4Show.com.
Yes, ma'am. And make sure y'all follow us on Instagram. Queen, where can they follow us on Instagram?
The M4 Show.
Now, if y'all haven't liked and subscribed, it would make the Queen very, very happy. If you can go ahead. Very? What should they do?
You should go ahead and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're watching or listening. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button.
It's free, and your first step to becoming a millionaire. Go ahead and click that button. And let's get into the show.
Let's do it.
Body's weakness in life. You don't think so?
In life,
I feel like everybody has some type of allergy. No, we're coming back from Davis. It was Black Family Day yesterday. We're both UC Davis alums. We were tabling, selling board games, having a good family reunion. But these trees and these flowers are still
not agreeing with
in my airway and not agreeing with this. But a lot of questions that we got from folks while we were in Black Family was, how's the business going? How is Black Wall Street? How's the game? Are y'all in schools? And it was just a lot of love to just be able to be back at Davis and tell people the progress that we've been making. But something that I know has been on my mind, Sinclair, and something that happens when we're in a lot of these schools is students have business ideas, but they don't necessarily want to make a lot of money from their business idea, right? They have an idea where it's like, I just want to help people. I want to help the homeless environment. I want to help the folks that don't have their citizenship in America. I want to help folks that are surviving from police brutality. Like, they just want to help people. So they really have a concept of a nonprofit. But that's not my expertise, right? So what we're going to do in this episode is we brought in an expert. We brought in the boss on a budget, Miss Tiffany Allen, who's going to be able to break down not just how to start the nonprofit, Queen, how to fund the nonprofit.
That is the question.
That is the question, right? You definitely need to make sure you still have a business model. You still have a way of funding the amazing work that you're doing. So if you're interested in having a nonprofit, if you're interested in solving problems within the community, this is going to be the episode for you. Make sure you share it with a friend, like and subscribe, and get your notepad out, because this is going to be an amazing episode. Queen, are you ready?
I'm ready.
You ready?
Yes.
All right. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Over 50% of Black Americans are unmarried, and only 2% of Black families in America have a net worth over $1 million.
We are on our journey to not only join that 2%, but grow that 2%.
Facts. I'm Devon Travell, creator of Black Wall Street, the board game, with my beautiful co-host.
I'm Sinclair, aka the Health Nerd. You can go to our website at them4show.com, our Instagram at them4show, and our YouTube channel at Melanated Married Millionaires in the Making.
And welcome to the M4 Show. Welcome back, beautiful people, to the M4 Show, Melanated Married Millionaires in the Making. I'm your host, Devon Travell, creator of Black Wall Street, the board game. And as usual, I have my melanated, my dancing, my beautiful, my finer woman herself. Please introduce yourself.
What is up, everybody? My name is Sinclair, aka the Health Nerd. And I got a little bit of love this weekend.
You got a lot of
my
the Health Nerd,
right, and even with my name too. A lot of people are like, "Oh, one woman came up and said, what's your name? And he said, Devon. He's like, I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to remember that because I only remember names that start with a J.
Hurtful.
And then I was like, oh, should I even bother saying mine? I was like, oh, I'm Sinclair. And she goes, oh, you know what? I'm going to remember that because it's like
I'm
Sinclair.
standing right there.
I'm going to remember that because it's like Sinclair from Living Single, which is actually where the name comes from. So that was nice. It's always nice to find people who knows where it comes from.
Indeed. And it's always nice to be forgotten. Awkward, right? Yeah. How'd that feel? But Sinclair, I'm very excited about this episode, as you know, because we want to start a nonprofit one day.
Yep.
All right. And there's a lot of paperwork. It is, if you don't know the process, it can seem very daunting. What's the word? Daunting, right? It can be feel very intimidating. But if you have a mentor, if you have an expert, someone who can help guide you through that process, it makes it that much easier. So we want to welcome, right, the amazing talent, the amazing genius, the amazing energy behind Boss on a Budget, Miss Tiffany Allen, who helps people start, grow, and fund their nonprofit. Please welcome to the stage, Queen Tiffany Allen. Come on through.
Hi. Hello. How y'all doing?
We are blessed. We just got done eating lunch, so we have full tank of energy. How are you doing?
I'm good. I just woke up from a nap, so I should be good.
There we go. Also full tank.
Right.
What city are you calling in from? I know we were talking about Atlanta, and you were like, well, Atlanta's huge. I don't know what that means. What city are you calling in from?
So I am from PG County. I am in the suburb of Washington, D.C. So I know a lot of people know PG County because of the Black wealth here. So that's where I come from.
Shout out to PG County, one of the wealthiest Black counties in America. They have a whole Black Excellence did a whole video on y'all. Shout out to that.
Yes.
How long have you been in the nonprofit space, either your own personal nonprofit or helping people start their own profits?
Yeah, I've been doing this since 2016. So I've worked with nonprofits and worked for nonprofit probably since like 2007, but really started Boss on a Budget in 2016.
And what motivated you to do the switch from helping the other nonprofits do their thing to starting your own business that helps nonprofits start and launch? What was that switch? Yeah,
so Boss on a Budget started as a side hustle, and it was really because at the time I was helping my partner. He was launching his nonprofit, and I was helping him because I had experience in grant writing and had done some of the work. So I was like, okay, I can do this. I can help him launch. And we made all the mistakes, right? Like we did all the things wrong. But in that process, I realized like, who's going to help us like navigate this space? Like, this is a great idea. He was making such an impact in the lives of young people, but there wasn't like a mentor out there or people you could turn to say, hey, do this, not this, or, hey, this is where you find funding. Or, hey, you don't have any money, but this is how you raise money to get the money you need, right? So nobody guided us along the way. And I realized I have some skill sets that I can teach people, and it just kind of grew from there. So I started teaching grant writing classes free in my community. And then from there, I realized like people don't have the basic structures in place for their organization. So they can't even get to the grant because they don't even know how to describe their mission or write out their program and stuff like that. So Boss on a Budget grew from a grant writing kind of focus to nonprofit development. And then eventually, how do you even just raise any money, not just grant writing?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's like it was born from a need, which I feel like is where a lot of businesses and successful businesses come from. I wanted to rewind a little bit. You mentioned that you really got here because you made a lot of mistakes. Y'all made a lot of mistakes at the beginning, which we can definitely resonate with.
For sure.
So I'm curious to know, what are some of those mistakes that you made that you were able to learn from?
So the mistakes we made had a lot to do with paperwork. So like when you have a passion for the work, and my partner, he was very passionate about the work, but he didn't have the patience for the administrative side. So that's kind of where I stepped in.
I can attest to that for sure.
So I came in and I didn't realize like, oh snap, there's like, I owe stuff to the state. Oh snap, I owe stuff to the IRS. And I looked up and our status had been yanked. So I had to go back and reapply for like nonprofit status with the government. It was a lot. So I think the biggest mistake was not paying attention to all the rules and the regulations and staying up on that. But to my point earlier, like there's nobody telling you this. Like there's nobody telling you, hey, check in with the state and make sure you send in this document, because the state doesn't do it. Like they may remind you and say, hey, fill this paper out, but you really find out when you're delinquent or when something bad happens. And I was just used to getting like stuff in the mail that was in pink or in red. And that's how I found out about things. And that's how I realized I was supposed to be doing something. So that was like I think one of the biggest mistakes we made. But overall, for people who start nonprofits, I think a huge mistake is they don't really think about money. And I think that it sounds funny because everybody needs money and they talk about funding, but they don't do like the necessary planning steps to get to the money. So anytime someone asks me, like, Tiffany, how do I raise this money? My question is, how much you want to raise and what's your budget? And I always hear crickets. I always hear crickets when I ask that question. And nobody really thinks about how much and what it's for. And if you think about it, when you ask somebody for money, those are the first two questions they ask. How much do you need and what is it for? So I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is like not thinking about how to get to the money and just sitting down writing a budget. It does not have to be that hard, but people make it hard because they're intimidated by budgets. And then thinking about, if I know what my number is, what's the most realistic way I can get there? And for me, I like doing that because I can be creative. I can dream through it and figure out, okay, this is how we can make the money. But for most people, they back up and they're like, I just want the money. I don't want to have to do the work, which is interesting. But yeah, those are the biggest mistakes I've seen: paperwork and like not focusing on the money.
And I feel like the not focusing on money, I feel like because it's labeled nonprofit, people think it doesn't involve money, or money is not an important factor in that type of business. But it's important in any business because you need money to do to do the work, right? Everything needs money to operate. So for folks out there, right, if you're thinking about launching a nonprofit, the work is important, right? That's definitely the heart of the business, but money is also important. And just because it's nonprofit doesn't mean you don't need money to operate the business.
Right.
Yeah. And I would say like there are a lot of weird thoughts and myths around nonprofits and money. Like it's the things that I hear, like some comments I get on my YouTube channel, or like the CEO shouldn't be worried about the money or worried about their salary. They're a charity. And I'm like, well, how else are they supposed to do the good work if they're not getting paid? How are they going to pay their families, like feed their families, if they're not getting paid? And how else do you think the world goes around? Like, I tell people all the time, nonprofit hospitals exist out there. There are nonprofit colleges. They charge tuition. They charge for services, right? You can charge for services as a nonprofit as long as it centers on your mission. So I think people have like some warped ideas about money, but the reality is if you're going to survive, you have to be thinking about money, and you have to be thinking about money long term.
Facts. So another question that typically comes up is people trying to decide between, should I be a nonprofit versus should I just be a regular business? Right. And you were bringing up a lot of things like, salary, charging for services, charging for products. So it seems like it's very much like a normal business. To you, what would be an advice that you give folks that are maybe on the fence, right? They have a business idea. How do you determine whether you should go nonprofit or go regular for profit?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. So I would think about a couple things. The first thing is like, what is the purpose of it all? And what is your bottom line? So if your bottom line is just profit and you're just trying to make money, then I would seriously reconsider whether or not you want to be a nonprofit, because all of the hassle and the administrative burden you have to go through just to be as a nonprofit it's a lot. So if your main focus is like, I'm just trying to make money, I would think about it. If your purpose is more mission focused, right? Like if it's more you want to help or get to a certain good outcome in your community, then you probably will lean more toward a nonprofit. There are other considerations, but I would absolutely start there. I would think about like, what is the reason I'm doing this? What is my why? And if all of your decisions come down to whether it's good for the mission and not whether it's good for profit, then that's pretty much a sign that it's going to lean towards nonprofit. Because when you're a for-profit, the bottom line is this going to make me more money? And you can't that's not a question. That's not really an appropriate question to ask first when you're a nonprofit. Like, money matters, but it's not necessarily the first question you ask. Your first question is, does this help me reach my mission? Is this helping me reach my charitable purpose? But I think another big one that people just don't understand about nonprofits is that the whole thing around ownership. A lot of people think when they have a nonprofit, it's their nonprofit. They'll say, oh, my nonprofit does this, or I own a nonprofit. And you do not own a nonprofit. A nonprofit is a public organization, right? So if you're going to do direct services in the community, you're typically what's called a public charity, and nobody owns that. And the people who make decisions for that nonprofit, the people who have oversight over that nonprofit, are the current board of directors. And if you're the founder of the nonprofit and you're not on the board of directors, you don't have any say, technically, legally, in the direction of the nonprofit. So you could have started a nonprofit, and then, 5 years later, you're no longer on the board, you're not associated with it, you're not working for the nonprofit. You don't have a say in what happens, in what direction it goes. The board as a collective has a say. And the other piece about this is a lot of people want to go full time with their nonprofits. So that means you need to become a salaried person, like a staff person. Well, you don't set your own salary. You don't appoint yourself. Your board does that. So you're relinquishing, I can't say that word, y'all. But you know what I mean. You're giving up power to a group of people. And when people hear that, they get really nervous.
Right.
Yeah. Like, oh, this is my baby. Like, this is my thing. So I'm not going to just let somebody come in and take it. But, that's how it's set up, and people don't understand it. So, I mean, you'll hear stories in the news about founders who no longer are associated with their nonprofit, or they're kicked out or fired. And that's just what it is. So I would think seriously about ownership, especially if you're creating products. Okay. If you want to talk about wealth and ownership, like if your nonprofit owns a product or owns your intellectual property, it's not yours. So I would think about that too. Right. I don't think people should only have nonprofits. I know I'm kind of like pivoting to something else, but I just have to say this because I know you guys talk about wealth too. But you need to think about like having something as your own in addition to your nonprofit. So I just want to throw it out there.
I like that. Listen, it was getting spicy. Hold on. It was getting real spicy. If you're listening, you just joined. We got Tiffany Allen from Boss on a Budget breaking down how to start a nonprofit, how to grow and fund the nonprofit. But right now she was going through the whys, right? And making sure that you completely understand this is not your 100% owned entity. This is a public serving entity. You need a board of directors. You need people that you can work with. So if you're the type of person that you don't like to work with people, right? A nonprofit might not be the pathway for you. You might want to go ahead and keep with that LLC or keep with that sole proprietorship, right?
That's real.
But you were talking about board of directors, and we might get deeper into this later on. But I really want to talk about what advice do you have for people trying to select people that they can trust, people that they can hand their vision to, their dream to, and hopefully, make the right decision down the road as board of directors. So what kind of advice do you have?
The biggest piece of advice is that you have to vet people. A lot of times when people are selecting their board, they're coming from a place of desperation. And so I just need people for the paperwork, or I just need people because the state says I need a board, or the IRS expects to see that I have a board. And they're not thinking like long-term about, do I have the right personalities at my board? Do I have the right skill sets? Do I have the right experience? Do I have the people who have the right networks for what I need for my organization? And so people often like, well, can you just serve? Can you just serve? And that comes through in how they attract people. But if you want to attract the right people, I say all the time, it's a privilege to serve on your board. It's a privilege to serve on a board that's going to impact the lives of people. You are doing like important life work. So that person who's coming to join is a person who's going to help you launch this nonprofit to success, and look at all the lives you're going to change. What kind of people do you need in the room to do that? Right. And a lot of times people aren't thinking about like recruiting people who are going to actually do the work too. because the thing that's different with a startup nonprofit versus an established nonprofit is you have what's called a working board. And so a lot of times the board, who's supposed to just only be doing oversight, has to do a lot of the work too, because you just don't have the manpower, right, to do it. And sometimes they attract people or get people who are just like, no, I just want to tell you what to do. I'm not trying to do anything though. And there's this friction also when it comes to the startup process. So you got to think like holistically, where are we right now and what do we need to get to our next step? And when you ask those questions, then it can become a little clearer about who should be in the room and is it the right season for this person or these people to serve with you. But the other piece I would say is just make sure everyone joining has the values, like they embody the values of your organization and they buy into your vision. So that means you got to have a vision, right? That means you got to be able to state your vision. You got to lead in a way that people want to follow you, that people want to get on board. So like, just think long-term and strategically. Think beyond, oh, I want to help somebody. Yeah, but in order to help somebody and you want to actually have an organization, that requires some strategy. So think about like long-term, what you need to get to your vision. And I know that was a whole lot, but as you can see,
it was good.
like having a nonprofit is a whole lot, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's more than just, I want to help somebody. I want to, do a coat drive. Like you can do that without a nonprofit. But when you cross that line and say, okay, now I want to have an organization, it's a whole nother ball game.
Oh yeah, and this is the perfect amount. Keep it coming, Miss Tiffany.
Okay.
This is the perfect amount. And we're already seeing good. We got questions coming in as well. So I know someone was asking about, and Sinclair, you got better eyes than me, a 501 CB. I know there's 501c3. So I'm not sure how much details you're able to give us, but can you talk about this? What is a 501c3? And then can you talk about what is a 501c-B and any highlighting differences between the two organizations?
Right. So the interesting thing about nonprofits is that you become a nonprofit at the state level because a nonprofit is a business structure. When you go to the IRS, you are asking the IRS to be exempt from income taxes. So it's two different things. They're very much related. But as a 501, let's say C3 organization, you're asking the IRS not to tax you on the income that you generate, right? And so 501c3s are established as charitable organizations, right? So charitable, they're organized for educational reasons, religious, research, sports, like it's a whole definition with the IRS. But there are other tax exempt organizations as well, right? Like there are associations, there are health insurance organizations, things like that are different 501cs. But typically, if you want to do charitable work, you are organized as a 501c3. So you ask for tax exempt status under that code, right? So a 501c8 is just a different kind of tax exempt status, still with the IRS. And I'm not as familiar with 501c8s. Like I looked really quickly, it looks like they're for fraternities and sororities, which can be designated as nonprofits, which means if they make money, they're not going to get taxed on it, but they're not necessarily organized for charitable purposes. They're organized to benefit their members, which technically is, a nonprofit too. It's just that as a 501c3, you are a public organization doing work in the community, usually charitable work.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for the breakdowns, Tiffany, and thank you for the questions. Feel free, if you have ideas of starting your nonprofit, go ahead and drop them inside of the comments below.
Is another question.
Yes, Queen, you got it.
So this says, so if you created a nonprofit business, what would keep you in if you can be kicked out? Also,
see, they already thinking strategically.
Right. Also, would the board be based on the money they can contribute?
Two good questions. So I'm gonna break it down. So the first question: if you create a nonprofit, what would keep you in? So there are some people you will see on the internet that say, okay, create a single member nonprofit, where there's a separate layer where you as a CEO or the founder have like a final say in certain decisions. So it can kind of be a buffer or help prevent a decision that you don't want because it has to run through you. I'm just going to say this. That's not exactly legal in all states. And I don't know if it would stand up even if you tried to put it in your bylaws. So I would tread carefully with that, and I would consult a lawyer. And I'm just going to give my little disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not your lawyer. So, but I know of the practice. And if you want to go that route, I just would really recommend you to speak with a lawyer who practices in your state and who understands nonprofit law. Right. So there's not much preventing a board making decisions. But this is the thing. When board members serve, they are bound to certain duties. Like there's 3 of them. Duty of care, loyalty, and obedience. And part of that is making sure that they follow the best interests of the organization. So if they decide the best interest of the organization is for you to step down, that's their decision to make.
Wow.
Right. And some of that can be contested. Maybe some of that is subjective, right? Your idea that it's the best step, but that's their role. They have a legal and an ethical obligation. So I would say make sure you have a good relationship with your board, right? Make sure like you keep the communication lines open, but it's within their right to be able to decide whether or not you're not the best fit for the organization. So I just want to throw that out there. But I know plenty of people who started nonprofits who retired from the nonprofits. And I know of some stories where people are kicked out, but some of the suggested or accused behavior was inappropriate. So it's like, just do what's right, and let the rest happen, fall where it may. That's what I could say.
I feel like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I feel like that goes back to your point on really being strategic and wise with who you're choosing as your board members, right? If you're just choosing your 5 closest friends who, you're just trying to get some names on the list so you can start your organization, that may not be the best bet if you really want a long-term successful organization. So yeah, I think that it's just really boils down to like being strategic, even if you got to put off actually starting it for another month. Like I think that time frame of really making sure you're vetting your board members is going to be well worth it in the end. So you don't have to worry about those issues, right? Getting kicked out for any reason that you shouldn't be.
Because you brought the wrong dish to the family reunion, and all of a sudden now you kicked out the nonprofit.
People can be petty.
People can definitely be petty.
Well, and you put your mom on the board, and mom try to take over the meetings. What you gonna tell your mom to stop?
Right? Nope.
I mean, so that's a real life situation, that I've talked to people about. So you just, family and friends. I would not advise that be a long-term strategy, or a strategy if you can help it.
Right. And then they're asking about the contributions for the board. And I think that's a personal decision, but you can definitely give Ms. Tiffany, if you can give your own advice on how you suggest people with contributions to the board.
So there's different schools of thoughts on this around like board contributions. So generally, it's good practice to ask your board to contribute, because when you are when you're asking someone else to give and your board isn't giving, that's not a good look. And sometimes when you're asking for grant funding, they'll ask, is 100% of your board giving? So you want to be able to say yes, but that can look differently depending on your board structure, right? So you could ask them to give a significant amount, which is significant to them. And what's significant to me is different than someone else. Mine might be $100. Someone else might be $10,000. So you can let people decide what that is. I firmly believe that people, especially in the startup space, should ask their boards to give, because we're all investing in this organization. And if the board isn't investing in it, who else is supposed to invest in it? Right? Like if the board can't say that they believe in it by sowing their seeds into the organization, then why are they even there? Like that's just my opinion, right?
Yep.
But sometimes you want people on your board who have what is called lived experience, right? Especially if you're serving people with lesser means, they may not have the money. So, I wouldn't necessarily like not add them if their experience is important to the board, but I still come back to everybody should be giving something, even if it's $5, right? Like what people give to what they care about. I'm gonna tell you this. People give and spend money on what they care about, whether they have it or not. So
right. Whether they have it or not.
So, like, if you're committed to this, then I say your board is on there. They should be giving, and they should be giving monthly. Because who else is going to do it? It's going to be the founder. So the founder just has to pay all the money, but they take all the risk, right? Like with their money, I don't think that's fair. So.
Plus, I think it also probably will help with the vetting process because, to your point, right? If they're in it for the wrong reasons, if they're trying to get like, what's in it for me? What's my return? Right? Is like that's not what this is about. This is about, do you believe in this? Do you believe in the work that this organization is about to do? Then put your money where your mouth is. Yeah, exactly. But if you don't, then we'll find another member.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
So again, we're here with Tiffany Allen from Boss on a Budget. Make sure y'all check out the resources she has available for you. If you are interested in starting your nonprofit, you can go to www.bossonabudget.com. You see it right there on the screen, bossonabudget.com. Everything's spelled normal, and start tapping into the resources. We're going to take a quick commercial break. But when we get back, Miss Tiffany, what I would love to do is do a nice breakdown. And I don't know how many steps there are. Right? 5, 6, 7, 8. But if we can do a nice breakdown on your advice for how to start a nonprofit, whether that's, starting with your mission, your vision, getting your tax ID, all that stuff. Let me rewind, because I'm sure it's a long process. Right, yeah. I'm positive.
27 steps.
I'm positive it's 30 steps, right? But if someone right now is listening, if they're watching and they have it in their heart, in their spirit to start a nonprofit, what do you think would be the first 3 steps, right? The first 3 things that they should do after listening to this podcast, after talking to their friends and family, first 3 things that they should do to move in the right direction. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I can do that.
Cool. Beautiful. Let's take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we are going to get 3 solid steps forward for starting your nonprofit. We'll see you soon. Look, we're going to get right back into the amazing podcast. But if you didn't know, in 2017, we created Black Wall Street, the board game, because we thought more families needed to know about the history of Tulsa Black Wall Street. More families needed to know about the legacy of Black excellence left behind of Tulsa Black Wall Street, that we can own a Madam C.J. Walker Beauty Salon. We can have a Booker T. Washington High School. We can have an Uncle Steve's Barbecue. We can have a Renaissance man like Simon Berry, who had his own taxi service and bus service that got bought out by the city of Tulsa. We have brilliance in our DNA. We wanted to make sure that your family can play a game that teaches them about this brilliance. So we have Black Wall Street, the board game, right here. We had the first edition available in 2017. That got sold out. We're on the second edition right now, or you can get the beautiful masterpiece version of the game as well. It's up to you. Head to playblackwallstreet.com and get yourself Black Wall Street, the board game, to empower you, your family, and generations to come. Playblackwallstreet.com. Let's get back to the episode. Back to it, y'all. All right. Take out your notepad, take out your Apple Notes, Google Keep, whatever you take notes on. We're going to go through the 3 steps, action steps you can take. Queen Allen, take it away.
Okay. So what I heard you say is a little different than what I would tell people, like, okay, how do you start a nonprofit? These are the steps. But I actually like how you phrased it, because these are the steps that people miss. These are the steps that people kind of bypass and go straight to the paperwork. So if I had an idea, I was sitting at home listening, this is the first thing I would do. I would figure out, what's the mission, right? Like, what am I actually trying to do? Who am I trying to help? And what changes am I trying to see in them or in the population that I want to work with? And really getting clear on that. Because sometimes when I encounter people, they're like, I just want to help somebody. And I'm like, well, who do you want to help? Mm-hmm. Well, I want to help homeless people. Then I want to help moms. And then I want to help veterans. And then I want to help like kids. And I'm like, well, that's a lot. So let's try one lane and like get really good in one lane. So like getting clear for yourself what your mission is, who you're serving, and why. And I like to do it in terms of like the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. Sometimes I'll be missing it, but the who, I got to sing it to myself a little bit. Who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. And that simple exercise is really helpful for you to figure out, what the heck am I trying to do here? What's going to be my focus? So that's the very first place I would start. And then the next step should be to do your research. And by doing your research, I mean, figure out who in your area is doing similar work. What are the organizations doing work? How are they structured? Who do they serve? How do they serve them? What are they doing well? What are they not doing well? What are they missing? Like, where are the gaps in your community where you can fill some of those gaps? Because if the worst thing you want to do is duplicate something that's already being done, and you do want to kind of find your own lane and have your own spin on what's happening in your area, right? And sometimes you come up with an idea that nobody's doing, and that's great, but you need to validate that. So you got to do your research, look at data as well. So look at statistics, look at research. What does research say works well and what you want to do? Because I'm pretty sure there's some kind of research study that shows if you do mentoring, you need to do it this way. There's a lot of research on mentoring, right? There's a lot of research on houselessness and things like that. So know what the field is talking about. Like, know what's best practice, so you're starting well informed. So do your research. This one people skip. And part of that research, I would also talk to people who look like the people you want to serve, or who are going through something that you want to help. Ask them questions about, like, what are their biggest struggles, right? What do they want to see happen? What do they think the solutions are? Talk to the people you want to serve. They can give you a lot of great information. And also talk to potential donors. Talk to people who potentially would give to you, or who would be interested in giving to you, and ask questions about why they would give. And that helps you with the fundraising. Like, that helps you figure out the right terms to use and buttons to push when you're fundraising. So that's number 2. And then number 3, we already talked about. We talked about the board.
Got it.
Because a lot of people think you do the paperwork and then you find a board, but it's the other way around. Actually, you're supposed to find a board first, and you guys decide together what the mission, what the final mission statement will be, your vision statement, and then you guys vote in a meeting on you're going to incorporate and all this kind of stuff. That's the right process that most people don't take. So find people for your board, start talking about the work you want to do, and establish that initial board.
Nice.
There it is. Those are your 3, y'all. Figure out the mission. What are you going to do? Who are you going to do it for? Where are you going to do it? And why you're going to do it. I missed one.
Where, when, where, why.
There we go. And then make sure you do your research, right? Your market analysis, what's going down in your environment, so you're not duplicating. And then last but not least, build the team, get the Avengers on the squad. Who's going to help you do this work? I want to ask a question. It may be a bad question, but you let me know, because we are Melanated Married Millionaires. So I think for folks that may be listening, they may want to start a nonprofit specifically for a particular ethnic group, right? Maybe they want to serve Black folks specifically. Maybe they want to serve Latin folks specifically. Is that okay for a nonprofit to be focused on one specific ethnic background?
I get this question a lot, interestingly enough. I do. Okay. And my answer is go with what best fills the need. So if the need is to like Black boys, and if that's your focus, that's your focus. Like, that is okay. Like, you think about the organization Black Girls Code, clearly that they're
Black Girls Code,
girls,
okay.
Right? So it's like, but sometimes people don't, they're fearful that they're not going to get money if they feel like they focus just on one group. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. I haven't seen it either way. So make the best decision for you. You could get money both ways, because there is funding if you're focusing on certain underserved populations only, right? So it goes both ways. So just figure out what works for you as an organization, but I haven't necessarily seen it as like a hindrance or a deterrent for somebody. People gonna do what they're gonna do. Let me just say that though. Like, when you decide to be unapologetically Black, as an example, people gonna have issues with that.
Yep.
But you just gotta know that going into it. But you can be successful still doing that.
And that's a perfect segue into one of the questions that we have in the chat, which is, how do you find donors, right? You're talking about, like, sometimes there are donors or grants or stuff out there for specific populations. Does that help find money, or does that hinder? Like, what do you find? Does it makes it easier to find donors when you're trying to fund your nonprofit?
So the best place to find donors when you're super, super new is your own personal network, right? So there's an activity that I talk about called the Circle of Influence. And it's like you figure out who's closest to you, who cares about you, and then you start going outward. So there are some people who care about you and may care about the mission. And if you ask them, they would give money to support your organization. And those are your first donors. There are people in your orbit who would support you right now, but they don't know what you're doing. So they haven't. And if you haven't asked them, they may know what you're doing, and then you haven't asked them, they may not necessarily give until you do. People are funny that way. And then you start going out, like who's in your social circles and who are in your professional circles. There are people also in your social and professional networks that if they knew what you were doing and heard about it, they would support it. So the best places to start to find donors is in your own personal networks and in the networks of your board. Because that's one of the key roles of your board is to help expand the organization's network. So the board should be doing their own circle of influence activity and figuring out who's in their orbit that would be interesting in supporting the organization. And this is one thing I tell people all the time when they're fundraising. Do not lead with, give me money to help me launch my new organization. That does not motivate anybody.
Right.
But when you talk about an issue that people care about, like Black boys, right? Like by the time Black boys get in the third grade, people know whether they're going to end up in jail or not, right? Like there's a prison, like a school to prison pipeline. And I know you have sons and I know you have nephews, and that's not going to be their story. So we're going to interrupt that pipeline. But I need your help to do that. And this is how we're going to make that happen. And with your $25, we're going to change that story so that our boys can grow up and live the lives that they're meant to live. Like when you talk about it that way,
I want to get my card out right now.
You need an elevator pitch.
Right. Instead of, hey, I have a new organization and I'm going to be doing mentoring for some young Black boys in the neighborhood. Can you help? That may get some people motivated, like a teacher or your mom, but it's not going to motivate the masses. So you want to think about the message that emotionally pulls people, particularly when you're talking about donors. Grants are a little different, but I know the question was about donors. So like it's an emotional decision to give, right? Like people got to give up with their dollars, their hard-earned dollars. It's got to be a reason to do it. And a misconception we have about money is that people don't want to give. And I do not believe that. I do not come from a scarcity mindset when it comes from fundraising, and it does not benefit you to have a scarcity mindset when it comes to fundraising. So if you believe that there's not enough money out there, then there isn't. But if you believe there is enough money out there and people do give, then they do. And I mean, I could go on forever, but let me just give you an example. Damar Hamlin, the Buffalo Bills player who collapsed on the field this past winter, he had a toy drive it was like a random town in Pennsylvania. It had like maybe $1,000, $2,000 on the GoFundMe. When he collapsed on the field, he raised like up to $4 million for a toy drive in a random Pennsylvania town. I don't mean to call the town random. I mean, so don't get offended if you're from there, but I'm just saying, like, people didn't have any attachments to that town. And people probably didn't even know his name before that happened, but it was a compelling story and they decided to give because it was emotional. It was an emotional decision for a lot of people. So if you would have said, well, people ain't giving right now, they don't know about that town. Like, why would they give? People will surprise you constantly when it comes to money. You have no idea what people are willing to do. And I love to say all the time, people are grown. Let people do with their money what they want to do. Right. It's your job to present the opportunity and let whatever else happen. But if you're already saying, well, they're not going to give, then they're not going to give. So I'm done lecturing. I'm just saying, you cannot approach it with the scarcity mindset because you won't raise what you need.
And we definitely hope that folks that are listening hold and grasp that growth mindset, that abundance mindset that Tiffany was just saying. Money is literally abundant. They print it every day, y'all.
Right.
All right. It's up to you to tell your story and go get it. But Queen Allen, we appreciate you. We want to give you a little bit of a break because you've been cooking, you've been dropping some gems, right? But we're gonna enter into our Ask the Claire segment, and this is your opportunity to go ahead and ask Sinclair or myself any questions around business, relationships, or health.
Okay, so I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What is your number one tip if you're a new couple running a business together?
Oh yeah, I already know this one. Go ahead, Queen.
What do you think I'm going to say? Or you said you know your answer?
I for sure know my answer.
Oh, okay. Well, we might have the same answer. So you're letting me go first?
Yes, Queen.
Okay, great. Personality assessment. Do a personality assessment, even if you've done one in the past. If it was more than a year ago, do it again. And the reason why that's really critical is because it helps you delegate and divide the roles of the business based on your strengths. And that's really, really important because for a lot of different reasons, right? One, if you are a couple, I think naturally there can be gender roles that people may start to assign folks just because that's what's normally done in a relationship or in a couple or whatever, right? You got to remove those. This is a business partnership now. What are your strengths? What are my strengths? That's what we're playing into. So what he mentioned earlier, and we really resonated with you where you were talking about like being a visionary and not being like detail oriented or not being into the paperwork.
Nope.
That's this guy right here. Yep. Right. So I have defaulted to like he's the visionary, right? He's typically the one determining and really good, right? The gift is determining like, this is where we need to go. And I'm like, cool. Well, in order to do that, we need to fill out this paperwork. We need this license. We need all of these things in place. And that is where I come in. And so that is how we've been able to delegate our tasks. And it also changes over time. So I think there's like a two-part to that is continue to do them because things change, roles change, life changes. Like when we did our first personality assessment, I was there's a whole bunch of different ways, but I was basically the analytical and he's the visionary. And so that made it very easy. Like, okay, I'm doing a lot of, again, the detail oriented stuff because I see things, right? I connect dots. I can see details very easily that he may miss and vice versa, right? He's the big picture person. He's able to create that picture. He's able to motivate someone, right? That elevator pitch. That's this guy all the time. I'm just usually sitting there like, wow, I'm bought in and I'm already a part of the organization.
Right.
But like we just did it again this year and we both were in a different category.
Oh, wow.
And we were in the same category. We were in the driver's seat. We both tested into the driver's seat, which made us take a step back and say, okay, we need to reevaluate tasks and make sure that we know where you are supposed to be making the decisions and then where I am supposed to be making the decisions. Because we cannot both be in the driver's seat, right? We'll just be tugging at the wheel. So there are certain things that he makes decisions for, and there's certain things that I make decisions for. And so, yeah, that would be kind of my biggest suggestion is to do a personality assessment and keep doing them every year and have that kind of guide who does what within the business or the organization.
I love that.
Well done. Well, she kind of took my answer. I'm being wrong with you.
Yeah, you let me go first.
I did. Because I always got a backup. My primary was going to say delegation. Right. Say specifically, this is your role. This is my role. These are your tasks. These are my tasks. And not really the CEO title. Cause I feel like we used to use those titles, but then we realized we were doing so many other things that we actually dropped those titles and put something on that was more specific to what we want to do and where our expertise are.
Okay.
So delegation for sure, like she said, would be number one. Number two, I would say is creating the budget for the business. Unless this is a startup, right? Unless you're getting investments from outside, the businesses that we start, it comes from our own wallets. So you want to make sure it's all right. What is the budget each month that we want to invest in this podcast, in these board games? $700, $500, $1,000, $5, whatever it is, and make sure you're not overspending on that budget. Because what you don't want to do is you get really passionate about starting this business. And then you're overpaying all these games and now you're stressed about these bills. And now y'all start arguing about how much money you spent on podcast ads or how much money you spent on board games, all that stuff, right? So I would say go ahead and set aside a monthly budget that can go towards the dream. And then, of course, what your business is making will also be back into the business as well. But yeah, just make sure the money is good, copacetic, and you talk about the decisions.
I love that. Okay. I got it.
Good question. Oh, yeah, go ahead. You seem like you had something else on your mind.
No, I actually was thinking about it a different way. I just created a small administrative team. So a lot of what I've done for Boss on a Budget has been just me. But within the last year, I hired an assistant, and I had like someone helping me with marketing.
Mm.
So like I thought about, I need to understand their, like I have a sense of what their, locus of genius is. But it would be good if we all did our own personality assessments as a team, so we understand where our shortcomings are and then where our strengths are. And then we can all fit together. And then me as the lead can help position them in ways so they can thrive. So that's where my mind went. But I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course. And congrats on the growth of Boss on a Budget. Let's go.
It's up from here.
All right, keep going up. We talked about it on like maybe 3 episodes ago, kind of the hard decision that entrepreneurs have to make when they start finally hiring people onto the team to help it grow. Can you talk about like what was the tipping point for Boss on a Budget when you were like, you know what? I can't do this by myself anymore. This is a story. Okay. I can't do this by myself anymore. I need team. Go ahead.
For me, it was several people kept coming to me because they would see my content and they'd be like, so who's on your team? And I'd be like, I don't have anybody on my team. Like, it's just me. And they're like, because I had a full-time job at the time. And they were like, what do you mean? Like, how are you doing this? Right. And those questions kept coming up, made me examine myself. And it was because I wasn't getting a lot of sleep. And I wasn't setting good boundaries for myself. And I wasn't setting good boundaries for my relationships. So that was the first indicator for me that something was wrong. I thought it was a value, though, that I worked so hard and that I was like grinding for my business. And then I noticed that certain times of the year, I would just get slammed. It's 2 months out of the year in particular. I hit brick walls. And it's like, I did have someone helping with some marketing, and she was like, you need to shut down your calendar because I can sense something's going on. So I had to like literally shut down my calendar for 2 weeks just so I could breathe, just so I could like function. And I realized that if I want to get to a certain level, then it can't all be me doing everything. And I have to start leading. Instead of doing all the doing, I have to start leading. So I did step out there in it was November, and I hired an actual part-time employee. She gets a salary, benefits, not benefits yet, but she's like a salaried person. We take taxes out because we're both on payroll, and that's like the first step to me getting to a place where I can like hire even more, because I actually do need more people. But it just took me realizing that I didn't have good boundaries, and I had to rethink about like what I thought was a value, which really wasn't. Like not spending time with your family, not taking vacations. That's not something. That's not a good look for me. So I had to switch it around.
Right. So I know the Queen will definitely co-sign, affirm that vacations, the balance. I think we were in a very similar boat to you, maybe like two years ago as well. Like we were grinding, staying up late, editing all the videos, doing all the podcasting, doing the board game stuff, health coaching. And it was just like, we need help. So again, shout out to you for making that switch and continue the growth.
And I think the other activity that was helpful for us, and I think it was helpful even later on, and hopefully this will be a tool that folks listening can use, is we also did like the how much is an hour of your time kind of activity. So kind of breaking down like, okay, how much money, and this is especially helpful when he started speaking. And we were able to charge like an hourly rate. And so we had a clear number of like, okay, well, your time is worth this much per hour. So let's go look at how much we could hire somebody to do this same task. And if it's for less than what your worth is per hour, then it makes physical and logical sense to go ahead and hire somebody. So that's another thing of like, if you're not able to really decipher with your own kind of balance your own schedule, like whether this is the time or not, then that's maybe another indicator of, okay, let me start to write out like as much as you can, estimate like, based on how much money you make in a month or a week, kind of, get that down and reverse engineer that to how much you're making per hour, and then go quick research, write a quick little Google on like how much you can hire somebody to do that. If it's less, it would probably behoove you to delegate that task out so that you can focus on the revenue building activities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed,
Love that.
Agreed. So if you don't know, we like giving people action steps right? That we want to make sure that
Mhm.
after they listen to this podcast, they have some work to do. So, of course, you've already given them 3 steps, and that's to define their mission. That's to do some research on what else is going on in their local environment, possibly the
Mhm.
same, possibly parallel, and then also look for who might be able to be on their team, who's their potential board of directors, right? So that's one homework assignment that y'all can do. But
Mhm.
I know bossonabudget.com got some resources for folks as well. So if you were to highlight, one particular resource that you feel like people should go to the website and just go ahead and secure today, what resource would that be, and what can they expect to maybe get out of that resource, whether it's a blog, whether it's a one-on-one consulting, whether it's a class? Talk to us.
So my most popular product is called the Nonprofit Startup Workbook. And so if you go to my website and go to services, bostonbudget.com/services, you'll see under Nonprofit Startup, the Startup Workbook. And that has 10 worksheets, which outlines everything you need to be focused on in your first year. So it's questions around like your bylaws and your board, questions around your budget, putting together your outcomes and your logic model, putting together like plans for insurance and hiring. All the things you need to be thinking about to lay down like the foundation for your nonprofit is in that workbook. And it even includes bonus worksheets. Okay.
Nice.
So by far, like that is the best like product that I would start with if you're trying to start your nonprofit. I do have other services for fundraising and writing your first grant and stuff like that. And I do one-on-one consultations, but I always like to tell people start with the workbook because it helps give you a good grounding of like what you need to be focused on. Because so many times people fill out the paperwork and then they're like, okay, what am I supposed to do now? And so I'm like, go to the workbook, go through it, read through it. And then if you need help, then you can get coaching from me, you can get consultation and go from there.
There it is, y'all. Make sure y'all tap in, okay? The world is waiting for you to start your nonprofit. That community that you want to serve is waiting for you to start that nonprofit. All right. So don't let them down. Go ahead.
And there's no excuse.
There's no excuse.
There's no excuse, right? You got the workbook. You got the first couple steps. That's all you got to do. Let the rest play out.
That's right. It is.
Bossonabudget.com. Check out the services and get your startup workbook today. So we are going to go through some quick updates, Queen Tiffany, and then what we want to do is if you can definitely give a shout out to all your socials. I know you got the YouTube channel, you got the website, you got the IG, and then leave folks with some words of wisdom. All right, I'll let you stew on that, meditate on that, come up with some fire like the whole episode has been, and then we'll have you end us strong. But Queen, can you please give the folks updates you have on your side?
Yes. So we still have our LIT Leaders Innovating Tomorrow 12-week financial literacy program running. We are finishing up the last couple weeks of this cohort right now. That's going to be ending early June. And then we are going to be really working on improving the program so that come fall, we are ready to come back better than ever. And so right now we're expanding in the LA area. So you've got any schools, any LA schools, high schools and middle schools that sound like they would want to be a part of this program. Hit us up at info@playblackwallstreet.com and other Southern California areas as well, where we're looking to expand to Inland Empire, San Diego, San Bernardino, right? Any of those areas.
Ventura, which is where we are currently.
Ventura County. If also you're looking to have the program at any schools in any of those areas, also hit us up. Let's start the conversation on how we can help your scholars learn how to start businesses, learn how to learn ownership, right? The power of ownership, learn how to solve problems in their community through businesses and through entrepreneurship. So again, info@playblackwallstreet.com. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. I'm very excited. This was a good episode because, as you know, Queen, I want to start a nonprofit. We want to start a nonprofit. Yeah, you forgot? No, I know you didn't. We've been talking. So this was a good refresher for us. So as we're trying to teach the community, a lot of the stuff, a lot of the experts we bring on are also so that we can learn and we can take action as well. So hopefully within the next year, 2 years, y'all see a nonprofit coming out of the Walker household. But as an update, we are going to Tulsa's Black Wall Street All right, so Play Black Wall Street. We're taking a family. We're taking our team to Tulsa August 10th through August 13th. I'm looking at my logistics expert.
I think it's 11th through 13th.
August 11th through the 13th. You can go to playblackwallstreet.com. Tickets are already available. Everyone's going to get a game, of course. You're going to get a nice swaggy t-shirt, and we're going to be able to learn directly the history of Tulsa Black Wall Street from some local folks. We'll be able to go into the museum, support the local businesses there, and really just learn in detail about the legacy, the history, and the excellence of Tulsa's Black Wall Street. So if you're interested, right, if you're thinking of fun things to do with your family, if you're thinking of educational things to do with your family, if you're trying to inspire your scholars, your kids to be entrepreneurs, definitely make sure you head to playblackwallstreet.com and secure your ticket for the 2023 Greenwood Adventure. Playblackwallstreet.com. We'll see y'all there. Now, we want to end strong with our guest, right? Tiffany Allen from Boss on a Budget. Make sure y'all check her out at bossonabudget.com with some words and contact information. The airways are yours.
All right. Thank you. So thank you for having me. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm always willing to sow a seed, because I know when I sow a seed, all the seeds that will come from that. And I know the great things that are budding up in people all across the country. And I just love my people. So I'm going to help my people. But if you want to find me, you can find me at bossonabudget.com. You can find me on YouTube. I drop videos every single week. So I am at youtube.com/bossonabudget. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook at bossonab. And I'm going to leave you with my framework that I like to teach. So if you want to be successful, this is really in anything, but particularly in the nonprofit space, there are 3 things you need to activate. You need the belief, the skills, and the action, right? And you always start with your beliefs and your mindset. Examine where you are and what you believe about where you are. That whole thing I said about the scarcity mindset and believing that you can raise money, you have to believe that this is possible. You have to believe that this is going to work. You have to believe that people are going to support you. You got to start there. Get your mind right. Make sure then you go to the skill sets. Learn the skills you need. There's no excuse for you not to learn how to do this. Right? There's a lot of information out here and resources. So the onus is on you to build your skill set to do that. And then don't get stuck in just learning, then take action. So that's why I love that we talked about action. Take specific action and be strategic about that action. But start with your mindset, learn the skills, and take action. And I promise you, you will be successful.
Nice. There it is. Make sure y'all tap in, take action, go to bossonabudget.com today. Tiffany, we appreciate you. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much, of course. And everybody, thank y'all for tuning in to the Melanated Married Millionaires in the Making show. I'm your host, Devon Travell, creator of Black Wall Street, the board game.
And I'm Sinclair, a.k.a. the Health Nerd.
Make sure y'all secure the marriage. Make sure y'all secure the love. And, of course, make sure y'all secure the bag. Peace. Thank you for supporting the M4 show and our mission to increase the wealth of Black families.
If you received any value from this episode, any value at all, any, do us a favor and give us a like and subscribe on YouTube and Apple, Spotify, anything, all of them, all of them. Wherever you're listening, go ahead and like and subscribe.
And after you like and subscribe, make sure you send this episode to at least one family that you really want to see win. We'll catch y'all next time. Peace.